Hey, what's going on, guys? At the UFC 296 post-fight presser, Dana White confirmed a bunch of matchups for UFC 299, which goes down on March 9th. The headliner is Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Vera 2. But there has been a bunch of fights now confirmed, so we're going to go through all the notable fights on UFC 299. I'm going to give a reaction and early prediction to each one of those fights. Some of these I've already covered extensively in previous videos, which I will link in the description, but I'm still going to go over every notable fight on the card. Starting off with a heavyweight matchup, Curtis Blaydes versus Jailton Almeida. I love this fight. And honestly, this is going to be like a main card opener. This could even potentially be on the prelims. That's how stacked this card is. It is unbelievable in terms of the quality of fights that are on UFC 299. We're going to talk about the reason I think that may be why in a little bit. But Curtis Blaydes versus Jailton Almeida, this is a matchup that I've covered extensively before. I love this fight. I think it's a perfect matchup. You have Curtis Blaydes, who's this big heavyweight who has good wrestling, but doesn't have the best striking. In his last fight, he got finished by Sergey Pavlovich. Then you have Jailton Almeida, who's a guy that arguably belongs at light heavyweight, who's been having a lot of success at heavyweight, but his fight against Derek Lewis, which was on short notice because Curtis Blaydes had to pull out of that fight, it wasn't all that impressive. You know, he just kind of laid on top of Derek Lewis. There was times where it felt like he felt like he could find a finish where he wasn't really able to find a finish. But I think this is a perfect matchup to test Almeida's skills. This could be one of those fights where you're like, yeah, I knew Almeida belonged at light heavyweight because Curtis Blaydes is so big. He is so big. He's one of those true 265-pound heavyweights, probably cuts down to 265, has good wrestling, has decent striking, not the greatest striking, and Jailton Almeida doesn't really have any striking. I mean, it's a bit of an exaggeration, but Jailton Almeida is a kind of a BJJ specialist, submission specialist. So for this matchup, honestly, an early prediction, I have to go Curtis Blaydes. I think he'll be able to stuff the takedowns of Jailton Almeida. And if you can stuff the takedowns of Jailton Almeida, I think Jailton Almeida is going to be in trouble. I think Curtis Blaydes is going to have a huge size advantage in this fight. But I think this is an excellent fight to find out where Almeida is in terms of the heavyweight division. And I think this is a big fight for the weight class. And there's not a whole lot of guys at heavyweight that are like the elite of the elite, and Curtis Blaydes is one of those guys, so I'm excited to see Almeida. You know, you look at his recent opponents, Derek Lewis, I know Derek Lewis has power, but not that good. Jairzinho Rozenstruik, kind of similar situation, has power, has decent striking, but not that good. Shamil Abdurakhimov, obviously we know how good he is. And then the pleasure man, Anton Turkalj, who didn't even belong there and stepped up on short notice. So this is the first time I feel like we're getting a really good test for Jailton Almeida, but I'm going Curtis Blaydes with the early prediction. All right, next fight, Mateusz Gamrat versus Rafael dos Anjos. I kind of love this fight, but I kind of hate this fight. I mean, how long has RDA been switching back and forth between weight classes? And he's a guy that's still ranked at lightweight, but hasn't fought at lightweight since Rafael Fiziev, which was last July. So it's been about a year and a half since RDA. I messed that up in my previous video, so I wanted to mention that. Coming off a loss against Vicente Luque, where he got outstruck and outgrappled there. On the back end of his career, he's 39 years old, but I think Gamrot's one of those guys where, like, he's towards the top of the division, but he's kind of fluked his way to the top of the division. He got the win over Rafael Fiziev, where Fiziev got injured. He got a win over Jalen Turner, but Jalen Turner took that fight on short notice. Then the fight before that, when he got a real big test against Beneil Dariush was able to defeat him rather easily. And then you go back against Arman Tsarukyan, I thought that fight was a robbery. So this is an interesting matchup because I do think RDA is still a very, very good lightweight, and he's super well-rounded. And also, I think RDA is one of those guys who kept going up to welterweight, and he would have success against like lower level opposition. But the second he would fight some top opposition, he would end up losing, you know, whether it be Colby Covington or Kamaru Usman or any of the other names that he's fought at welterweight. But I feel like at lightweight, he still has a good chance against some of the top 10 guys like Mateusz Gamrat. But what has RDA's weakness always been? It's been his grappling. And what is Mateusz Gamrat's strength? It's his grappling. And I think he's improving with his hands. I think RDA's on the decline. So for an early prediction for this fight, I have to go with Mateusz Gamrat. I just think he'll be able to out-grapple him, have some moments where he has positional control. I think he'll be okay on the feet because RDA will be worried about the takedowns, and I think he'll probably get it done via maybe like a decision or so. But don't be surprised because RDA, when you look back at the grapplers that he's lost to, I've already mentioned some of them, but you basically have Leon Edwards, you have Kamaru Usman, you have Colby Covington. All those guys are elite grapplers at 170. So going down against an elite grappler, Mateusz Gamrat at 155, that's a big difference, you know, in terms of size. And I think that there could be a chance RDA can stuff the takedowns like Beneil Dariush did and maybe one on the feet because Gamrat doesn't have that good of a striking. But for an early prediction, I have to go Gamrat. I think he'll be able to out-grapple him. Moving up on, you know, we don't know the bout order, but in terms of Fight significance, I think this is kind of the order I went in. But we have Petr Yan versus Song Yadong. This is a fight that's kind of been rumored for a while. It is yet to be confirmed until now. It was talked about for the UFC China card that inevitably ended up being a UFC Apex card. This is a banger bantamweight matchup, but I kind of hate it and I kind of love it secretly. It's weird because Petr Yan is in such a weird spot in his career. He's on a 3-fight losing streak, lost 4 out of his last 5, but he's still one of the best in the world. Could arguably be champion right now. I mean, I know that sounds crazy, but the loss against Merab, okay, he got out-grappled. Fair enough. Fight before that, he beat Sean O'Malley. It was a robbery. Sean O'Malley's the current champion. Would love to see that rematch. Fight before that, lost a split decision to Aljamain Sterling. I thought he won that fight too, but it was not a robbery. Then you go back to the Corey Sandhagen fight, beat Corey Sandhagen on short notice. Look how well that win is aged. And then the fight before that, he's beating Aljamain Sterling and throws the illegal knee, and you have the butterfly effect of Mark Smith whispering to the doctor right in front of Aljamain Sterling, if you can't continue, it's a DQ. And then Aljo throws his hands back, gets the DQ, gets the title. And then it sends Yan on this career trajectory where he's now lost 4 out of his last 5. And the reason I kind of hate this matchup, even though I think this is a banger matchup, you have Yadong, who's on a 2-fight winning streak right now, who's super young, who's looking better than ever. I know the Chris Gutierrez fight, which wasn't even that long ago, it was a couple weeks ago. He didn't look great, but he didn't look bad by any means. But I just, a lot of people see Song Yadong as a future champ. And Petr Yan, on this streak that he's on, knowing that he still is one of the elite, I would like to see him get a bounce-back fight, like a Chris Gutierrez, like maybe a Rob Font, something along those lines, maybe a Ricky Simone. I would have liked to see a bounce-back fight, and then once he gets a win, okay, he's not under immense pressure to get a win, and now he can fight a Song Yadong. Or what I would have liked to see, my ideal situation, would have been Petr Yan get a win against a Chris Gutierrez or someone along those lines, like I just mentioned, and then fight Devison Figueiredo. I would have loved to see that matchup. But instead, we're getting him against Song Yadong. This is still a phenomenal matchup. This is still a fight that I'm really looking forward to. But just when you look at the circumstances and you add context to it, I would just prefer Yan to get a bounce-back fight like some of these guys do end up getting. Not that it's an easy matchup, but it's a much more manageable fight than Song Yadong, who's super well-rounded, has nasty power, nasty striking. His grappling is evolving. But overall, for this matchup, I have to go Petr Yan. Petr Yan is one of the best strikers in the UFC, has excellent grappling as well, has good jiu-jitsu. I mean, even Merab, who took him down and out-grappled him, I mean, Yan was stuffing a lot of takedowns. He was getting up off the bottom quite a bit. So I think this fight's going to come down to who's the better striker, and I think Petr Yan's the better striker. Now, I do think Song Yadong has more power, so can you imagine Song Yadong goes out there and chins Petr Yan? Imagine where his career will be at that point. But I'm going to go Petr Yan just because I think he's the crisper boxer on the feet. And I mean, he has excellent grappling. People forget because Aljamain Sterling out-grappled Yan at certain points. In the first fight for Yan against Sterling, Yan dominated Sterling in the grappling, was ragdolling him. In the second fight, outside of Yan getting careless and giving up his back in the second and third round, the fourth and fifth round, he dominated Sterling in the grappling. So Yan has excellent grappling. He has excellent throws, excellent trips, excellent top control, but he prioritizes damage over control time. He did that in the Sean O'Malley fight as well, where he would get him down for whatever reason, trip him down, maybe a throw, whatever, and then he would prioritize landing damage rather than keeping Sean O'Malley down. But he's still a phenomenal grappler. That's my point here. So I think Petr Yan goes out there and gets it done. I don't see him finishing Song Yadong unless he opens up a cut like Corey Sandhagen did. But don't be surprised if Song Yadong wins this fight. Has good power, has good striking, very athletic, young, getting better every single fight. And coming off a win over Chris Gutierrez, where you look at Petr Yan hasn't fought since all the way in March of this year. So it's going to be about a year layoff for Petr Yan, where for Song Yadong, he's going from December to March. So it's kind of a quick turnaround. Not a crazy quick turnaround, but kind of a quick turnaround. So it's a great fight. I love the matchup. I'm going Petr Yan in this matchup. Win via maybe a decision. Moving up on the card, we have Kevin Holland versus Michael Venom Page. This fight has been kind of rumored about for a while. Finally confirmed. And I love this matchup. But one thing I really want to highlight about this fight, and I just find it particularly funny, these UFC shills. When this fight was originally rumored, a lot of fans were like, oh my God, this is a banger fight. Love this matchup, blah, blah, blah. And then there was a rumored matchup of MVP versus Cedric Doumbé for PFL. And that's a banger matchup as well. It's a decent matchup as well. And everyone was like, oh, nobody cares about MVP. He sucks, blah, blah, blah. It just goes to show how fans are conditioned. And now they announced the Holland versus MVP fight. And everyone's like, oh, this is a banger matchup. I love this fight. So it's weird how the UFC fanboys, the UFC shills, the Dana White sycophants, their narrative changes based on what Dana White wants them to think, essentially, or what they think Dana White wants them to think. It's crazy to me. Overall, I really like the Kevin Holland versus MVP matchup. I think it's a very fun fight, but I think MVP's a can crusher. I've been watching MVP for a long time over in Bellator, and you look at his career, I mean, you know, the first time he got a big step up in competition was against Douglas Lima back in 2019, gets brutally KO'd. Since then, fighting a bunch of nobodies, gets the rematch against Douglas Lima. I thought he lost again, gets a split decision win. Fights Logan Stortley. I thought he actually won that fight, loses via split decision because it was so close. And then you look at the level of opposition he's fighting, it's not the best level of opposition. He's getting older, he's 36 years old, and he's incredibly one-dimensional. Just a striker, kind of a funky striker where he has this kind of style where he keeps his hands super low. And I think MVP was kind of a guy that was built up by Bellator for just crushing cans, essentially. I mean, I just don't think he's as good as a lot of people think he is. I think he's a good striker. I think he's a fun fighter to watch. But overall, I don't think he's this crazy, like, elite of the elite welterweight. And he doesn't have great wrestling either. And for Kevin Holland, to be honest, I kind of look at him in the same light. Not a can crusher, but he's not as good as a lot of people hype him up to be. He's a good striker, doesn't have the best grappling, has been out-grappled several times. And I just, you look at Kevin Holland's record, I just see him fighting much better level of opposition. Jack Della Maddalena in his last fight, very close fight. The Michael Chiesa fight. I mean, Michael Chiesa is a grappler. He went out there and submitted him. I know Michael Chiesa is kind of on the decline. The Santiago Ponzinibbio fight goes out there and gets a finish. And Kevin Holland's been super active. I mean, he's fought 3 times. This will be the 4th time he's fought since the Wonderboy fight. Wonderboy has fought once since that fight. And you go back, that's, his last loss before Jack Della Maddalena was against Wonderboy. Then before that against Khamzat Chimaev. So Kevin Holland's losing to really good opposition. Jack Della Maddalena, Wonderboy Thompson, Khamzat Chimaev. You go back and look at his other losses before that, Marvin Vettori on short notice and Derek Brunson, all grapplers at middleweight too. So I think Kevin Holland, just seeing the level of opposition that he's fought, I have to go with Kevin Holland in this fight. I think he has good power. I think he's kind of big for welterweight. And I think, MVP's a bit of, overhyped and kind of a guy that's been promoted by the UFC, by Bellator. And he's really he's not that good, even though he does have a flashy, incredible style to watch. Moving up on the card, we have Geoff Neal versus Ian Machado Garry. This was also confirmed on Saturday night. Absolutely love this matchup. Really looking forward to this matchup, but this is a tough fight. Ian Machado Garry was originally scheduled to fight Vicente Luque at UFC 296. Ian Garry got sick, had to pull out of the fight with pneumonia. And I really preferred the Vicente Luque fight for him in terms of a natural progression in his career. But he was booked to fight Geoff Neal a while back, and I think Geoff Neal pulled out of that matchup, if I'm not mistaken. That was all the way back at UFC 292. So he was supposed to fight Geoff Neal. Geoff Neal pulled out for whatever reason. Neil Magny stepped in. He beat up Neil Magny badly. And, he was supposed to fight Vicente Luque. Vicente Luque the fight ends up not happening because Garry gets sick. And now they're rebooking Geoff Neal versus Ian Machado Garry. I love this fight skill-wise, though. I think this is a much steeper test than Vicente Luque. I think Vicente Luque is kind of on the decline. I don't think he's as good as he once was. I still think he's a quality fighter, but I just think that brain injury that Geoff Neal gave him, I think that lingers in his head. And maybe he got over it after he returned against Rafael Dos Anjos, but I just seen him kind of tentative in that fight, and I just don't think Vicente Luque is what he once was. So I thought that was a much more manageable matchup for Ian Machado Garry, and now he's fighting Geoff Neal, who has great boxing, unbelievable takedown defense, good power overall. I mean, Geoff Neal went to war with Shavkat Rakhmonov and almost took him to decision the first time Shavkat's ever been to decision. He gets finished in the 3rd round via rear naked choke, but still, I think Geoff Neal's a much tougher fight for Ian Machado Garry than Vicente Luque was. But Ian Machado Garry has looked incredible in his career so far. And I know he hasn't fought the best competition, but he went out there and dominated Neil Magny from start to finish. Nobody really does that to Neil Magny. You look at the fight before that. KO's Daniel Rodriguez. Not the greatest win, but the way he did it was impressive. The way he didn't get touched. Fight before that against Kenan Song. Went out there and stopped Kenan Song. Faced some adversity in that fight. Got clipped badly, got hurt badly, survived, and then came back to finish the fight. And I just think Ian Machado Garry, he's 26 years old. He's improving fight to fight. His combinations look really crisp. His striking looks really crisp. He's good with his takedown defense. He's good in the clinch. And I think this is one of those matchups where we're really going to find out what is Ian Machado Garry's ceiling. Because a win over Vicente Luque, and we're like, yeah, he's top 10 for sure. He's really good. A win over Geoff Neal is like, you're really like top 5 gatekeeper. That's what Geoff Neal really is. I'm unsure what he's ranked currently, but he's like your top 5 gatekeeper, your championship gatekeeper. If Ian Machado Garry goes out there and let's say he starches Geoff Neal, I think Ian Machado Garry's one fight away from a title fight. So if he beats Geoff Neal, one more fight and then a title fight. But to be honest, as much as I love this fight, I kind of hate it. And the reason I hate it is because I really wanted Ian Machado Garry versus Colby Covington if Colby lost at 296, which he did. I think that would have been a huge fight. That could have been a headliner for like UFC Ireland, and it would have tested Ian Machado Garry's grappling. Where Geoff Neal, primarily a striker, primarily a boxer, we're going to find out who's the better striker between these two, but we're not really going to get to see Garry's takedown defense against a guy like Geoff Neal, where we would have seen it against Colby Covington if he decided to show up and fight. Plus, you have the whole angle of Colby's talking about Ian Machado Garry's wife, and, you know, he's talking all this crap. He's an internet troll, and I would have just liked to see that matchup. I think that would have been a huge fight. I think this is kind of a missed opportunity, too, because, and, you know, to be honest, I'm hoping maybe Geoff Neal falls out and Colby Covington can step in, because Colby Covington said he would like to fight on 299. He would like to fight on the Miami card, and that's a much, you know, I mean, both are great fights, don't get me wrong, but I would love that fight. Imagine the build up to that. I'm not a guy that's, you know, I don't love trash talk, but to be honest, Ian Machado Garry, Colby Covington build up, I'd be into that. That'd be awesome, and I would love to see that matchup. Primarily because I think Colby's a scumbag, and I would like to see Garry beat him up, and I think it'd be hilarious. But at the same time, I would like to see Garry's grappling tested. We haven't. I feel like Garry's going to be at a point where he gets to the top of the division, and we're going to be like, oh, we haven't seen him against a wrestler yet, and that's kind of why I want to see that matchup. And I think it's a really fun fight and would be a really fun build-up. But the Geoff Neal fight's really good. But I have to go Ian Machado Garry in this matchup. I think Geoff Neal is just going to be a step behind. I think he's going to be a little bit slower. And I think Garry is getting better from fight to fight. He's strong in the clinch. He's strong defending takedowns. He has good power. He has good combinations. He's super fast. And I think he gets it done against Geoff Neal. I think he goes out there, probably wins a decision. But I think he wins a fairly clear-cut decision against Geoff Neal. And I think it's going to be a really fun fight, and I think it's going to be a really good, you know, gauge of where Ian Machado Garry's skills are at. And I think it'll be a fun build-up, too, because you have people bringing up the mug shot and blah, blah, blah. And one thing I'll say about that, without delving into the details of the whole Ian Garry situation, why are more people mad that Ian Machado Garry had Geoff Neal's mug shot on a shirt? They're more mad about Ian Garry's shirt than they are about Geoff Neal drinking and driving where he can take other people's lives because he's careless and breaking the law and driving under the influence where people have lost family members because of that. I don't understand that whole concept, but I'm sure it'll be fun to watch the fans react and say, how could he wear this shirt? And, you know, it'll be a good back and forth, I think, and it'll give us a decent build-up for this matchup. But I have to go Ian Machado Garry in this fight. I just think he's a better striker, and I think he'll be able to get it done on the feet. I think he'll be able to win a decision or potentially even stop Geoff Neal, which would be absolutely incredible and would be a staple win. And then I'd like to see him get a jump up and, you know, fight who's ever in that top 5 at that point in time, get one more win, that'll be a number 1 contender fight, and then fight for the title. That's what I would like to see. That's a progression I would like to see for Ian Garry, who I believe is ranked like number 10 right now. Okay, last fight on the card, the main event. We have Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Chito Vera 2. Now, I've already discussed this fight in detail because this was announced a while ago, but I figured I'd touch on it in this video as well. I hate this fight. Merab's the true number 1 contender. Merab never turned down a title fight, despite what you may hear from people. And, you know, they gave him Marlon Vera because they looked at the division and they said that's the most manageable matchup for Sean O'Malley. They let Sean O'Malley get a robbery win over Petr Yan and then had him sit out for almost a year to get a title shot against Aljamain Sterling. Meanwhile, they had Aljamain Sterling turn around in a couple months to, you know, fight Sean O'Malley, to give Sean O'Malley the most optimal circumstances to become champion, and that he did. Because the UFC's looking to promote him. They're looking to push him into becoming a star. He's not a star yet, but Dana White, perception is reality, and he's going to keep telling you Sean O'Malley's a star and telling you he's a star, and then eventually, if he keeps winning, he will be a star. And this has a good story behind it, because if you go back to UFC 252 back in, I believe it was 2020, you have Marlon Chito Vera versus Sean O'Malley 1, where Marlon Chito Vera went out there and brutally chopped the legs of Sean O'Malley, then shucked him to the ground and brutally flash KO'd him with nasty ground and pound elbows. And then Sean O'Malley was stretchered out of the cage with no serious injuries in the first round. And since then, Sean O'Malley's gotten a lot better and Marlon Chito Vera has gotten a lot better. and now they're going to go against each other, and you're going to have this grudge match kind of, and Marlon Vera has an interesting personality, and Sean O'Malley's kind of bland, so Vera will talk some crap, and a lot of people will get behind him, and also stylistically, it's a compelling fight. Both guys are really good strikers. O'Malley's flashy, has good power. Marlon Vera, unbelievable durability, good stamina, and good power as well, but kind of a slow starter. So this is one of those matchups where I could see Sean O'Malley getting it done, but I could also see Marlon Vera drowning him in the later rounds as Sean O'Malley starts to get tired. This is a 5-round fight, and Marlon Vera is just impossible to get out of there. So I think this could backfire on the UFC, and you could end up with Marlon Vera as a champion, which I wouldn't necessarily mind, but I'm always going to be in favor of a meritocracy. So I kind of hate the fact that we're just giving out title shots. Oh, Sean O'Malley, we want to build him as a star. We want him to stay champion. Well, we'll keep him away from Merab. We'll give him Marlon Vera instead because we think that's the most manageable matchup right now. Meanwhile, Marlon Vera is only on a 1-fight streak. He barely beat Pedro Munoz. In the fight before that, he got dominated by Corey Sandhagen. So it really makes no sense that Marlon Vera is getting a shot. And Marlon Vera is one of my favorite fighters. So in a way, I'm happy he's getting a shot, but at the same time, he doesn't deserve it. I want a meritocracy, or at least some semblance of a meritocracy. And instead, we're just handing out title shots willy-nilly like it's a WWE, and it's a popularity contest. And I'm really not a big fan of that. And I think it could backfire on the UFC because I think Marlon Vera could go out there and stop Sean O'Malley again. Also, one thing I want to hint on is I think this card's stacked because I think they're really trying to put all the promotional power behind Sean O'Malley, and they really want to get a lot of people to tune into this card. And O'Malley's not a star by himself yet. He'll do decent, I think, and especially with this good storyline behind the fight. But I think adding all these other great fights to the card will push it a little bit more. And if Sean O'Malley goes out there and gets a highlight reel KO, it's going to build his star power. But also, I'm worried because right now we don't have a UFC 300 main event. And it wouldn't shock me if the UFC's like last minute looking for a UFC 300 main event and all of a sudden they shift O'Malley versus Marlon Vera to UFC 300 and they have 299 is still a very stacked card with a less than great main event, which would later be determined. I don't know what that would be off the top of my head, but they don't need a big main event because they have this massively stacked card. So it does have me worrying about UFC 300 because if you're stacking 299, what's going to end up on 300, especially considering we don't have a main event yet. But early prediction for that fight, I'm going to go Sean O'Malley. I think he gets it done, probably by decision, outstriking Marlon Vera. But don't be shocked if Marlon Vera goes out there and gets a finish in the later rounds against Sean O'Malley. Let me know what you guys think of all these fights down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.